Midnight shift employees, what's the creepiest experience you've had during your nighttime shift? I work on a cargo ship, and the night shift takes turns doing fire control rounds of every deck in the engine room. Maybe a month back, I was in the middle of one of these rounds. I was on one of the lower decks where we load long haul trucks like sardines, so tight you have to walk sideways between them. I'm shuffling along between these trucks and trailers with music in my ears. I'm looking at the temp on some of the freezer trailers to make sure it's all good, and it is, as far as I can tell. After just turning away from the trailer, I swear I hear a weak voice just behind me. "Logan," it says. I quickly pop an earplug out and turn around, but there's no one there. I stand still for a couple seconds and listen. The row of trucks I'm standing in is maybe 12 trucks long and 7 wide. Due to the darkness, I can maybe see for 2 trucks down the row to either side of me. That's weird, I think. I should be the only one down here. I grab my radio in my breast pocket and call the bridge. "Bridge, this is Logan on deck 3. "Yes, Logan, Bridge here. Did you guys call me just now?" "No. Why?" "No reason," I say, and end the call. Now I'm starting to calm down a little and start moving again. Right when I go to put my music on, there it is again. "Logan." Now I'm really freaked out. Last time I wasn't 100% sure because of the music in my ears, but now I really heard it. Someone said my name right behind my back. I'm frozen in place. I can't move. I'm pressed shoulder to shoulder between 2 trucks. I'm cold from fear all over. It feels like someone is standing right behind me in the dark, looking at me. Like if I turn around, I'll see a man shape in the row behind me. I hear it again. "Logan," the voice says. "Logan." Finally, after what feels like an hour, I turn my head and look behind me. Darkness. Nothing. What I do see, however, is the faint light of my phone in my back pocket. It's currently in an open call to my father. Call time is about 5 minutes, and now I can clearly hear my father on the other end. "Logan," he says, "why the hell are you calling in the middle of the night for?" Next story. I used to be a crew chief at IHOP during the night shift, but there wasn't a crew, lol. It was just me and one cook. One night, a man came in and seemed so friendly and insightful. He was telling me about his time as a music producer in LA. He was so polite with me throughout our conversation, something I can't stress enough, lol. A few more customers come in, and as I took care of their orders, the man I spoke to started talking to himself and laughing. Then the laughter got louder and louder and almost maniacal. He then went on a huge rant about the world, but he shouted in different pitches throughout the rant, even disturbingly changing his facial expressions. He scared off 2 of the other patrons, and I had to call the cops. When they showed up, his whole demeanor went back to normal, and he politely walked out with the police, but looked back at me and winked. I was scared the whole night. Edit. Want to clear something up though. I only had to call the cops because I asked him multiple times to settle down because he was legit scaring the other customers, and there goes my hustle, lol. The man was indeed employed with Sony. He handed me a business card with his hotel number written on the back. I really enjoyed our conversation, and it just added to my shock when I saw him short circuit and flip pancakes. Next story. Security guard here. For about 2 weeks during Christmas time, our facility shuts down. The only ones present are the guards. We work long, boring shifts, and all the lights except for the office areas are shut off. This was about 10 p.m. one of those nights. It's already surreal being alone in a huge facility in the middle of nowhere, at least a mile by car from the next nearest human. I'm walking around, no flashlight because I'm a dumbass, and like straight out of a horror movie, I see a person-like shadow move between 2 tall shelves. I start jogging down there, trying to be quiet so I can just observe if it's a person or my mind playing tricks. I track this person for about 10 minutes, only getting brief glimpses of shadows letting me know where they are, until I took a different route and finally saw the shadow of a person approaching me. I got out my light on my phone and stupidly yelled, "Security! Who the F's there?" It was our maintenance coordinator, Mark. His face was really red and he looked like he'd been crying. I was like, "Oh crap. Hey man, sorry. Everything okay?" He kind of mumbled, "Yeah, it's alright. I have some stuff to do in my office," and walked off. I heard later that he and his wife got into a huge fight around that time and she'd left him and went to stay with her parents. This incident was only a few days before Christmas, too. I never mentioned it to him when everyone came back from holiday, but I figure he just wanted to come somewhere safe and get his mind off of stuff, and I still feel bad for probably scaring the crap out of him on a really bad night. Yeah, this is just wrong place, wrong time, extremely awkward, but it happens. Don't feel too bad, OP. Next story. When I was in the oil field, I had to take a piss, so I walked to the edge of my work site and let it rip. Halfway through, a mountain lion walked right by me, like within 10 feet. That was scary. Another time, I'm standing on the edge of the site and shining my flashlight into the empty field, and I see all these little green emeralds. There's thousands of them all over the field, and I have no idea what they are. I walk out into the field about 30 yards or so and lean in on one of them. Yep, they were all spiders. Next story. I was a night shift security guard at a cemetery, and I worked alone. I was doing my rounds one night, and I noticed the metal gate to one of the old tunnels was slightly ajar. Then I heard voices. Now, these old tunnels were used to store high-value equipment, and policy was that if I found a door unlocked, I was to enter and secure the area, and only if I found something amiss to call the police. To be fair, we found doors and gates left unlocked all the time. And of course, I have no idea where the light switch is and all the lights are off. So I have to go creeping through these dark-ass tunnels with a flashlight, having no idea what I'm about to find. Turns out, one of the maintenance guys left a radio on and forgot to lock the gate. Next story. I used to work a late shift in a warehouse putting together online orders. We would leave the dock doors up because it got hot in the warehouse. Normally on slow days, we just hung out on the loading dock smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. Behind our warehouse was a small patch of woods, maybe like 2 acres, and just past the wooded area is a super ghetto apartment complex. I should mention, quite regularly we'd smoke reefer, and this was one of those times. My coworker and I are sitting on the loading dock staring at the woods. Lo and behold, some junkie comes stumbling out of the woods in tighty-whities. I, being pretty baked at this point, looked at my coworker and asked him, "Hey, I'm not seeing crap, right? A dude just came out of the woods in undies, right?" He calmly replies, "Yep, that's real." Then the junkie starts walking around in circles and he's yelling, "Yo, where the F are you?" I yell out to the junkie and ask him who the F he's yelling at. He keeps saying he, quote, can't find his homie. He kept yelling, and all of a sudden I hear this rustling in the woods. And I crap you not, a effing horse comes out the damn woods. The thing was all raggedy, like it had mange, and the damn horse looked like it was on drugs. This junkie looks at the horse and says, "There you are, dude." Anyways, I look at my coworker and ask if the horse is real, and he just nods, and we both watch this junkie guy in underwear and a junkie horse wander off into the night. I should probably say I don't live anywhere remotely rural. It's a pretty big city, and there aren't like farms or anything close by, so it's pretty rare to see a horse unless a cop is on it. Yeah, sounds like you maybe took one too many hits of whatever you were smoking there, OP. That is wild. Next story. Night shift at a hospital I used to work at. Get report at beginning of shift. Patient is nonverbal due to dementia. Literally, the report I get is they have such advanced dementia that they haven't spoken an intelligible word in several years, just mostly grunting and moaning. This hospital was old, very old. Tiny rooms, kinda a dark place at night. I'm basically trying to get this person's heart rhythm under control for most of my 12-hour night shift. It's 2:30 a.m. I'm running a cardiac drip on this person for hours trying to get things under control. Then all of a sudden, I see a lethal rhythm on the monitor, VTOC. Briefly go into the room and check on the patient. Look at monitor again, and the rhythm is now totally normal. The power in the entire building flickers very briefly, and the patient says in perfect clear English, "I was born in 1895. I need to go home," and repeats it several times, to my absolute horror. I go get another nurse, and patient is now muttering unintelligible sounds again, as they had been when I assessed at the beginning of the shift. Crap you not, this really happened. I didn't and don't believe in ghosts, but this incident made me wonder for several months after. Who knows, maybe it was just a coincidence and the multiple meds they were on. Next story. I'm a cab driver in a small mountain town. I've seen a plainclothes police officer hit in the head with a skateboard by a young teen having a psychotic episode. He died from his injuries later. I've seen a cougar running up the main street hissing at every movement. I've seen a man get into my cab wearing a huge unsheathed machete strapped to his leg and ramble out in a deranged fashion until he told me to pull over and he ran away. All these things are not necessarily scary, as the occultish type things you hear about night shift, but they were still scary. I'm a female cab driver, by the way, and yes, I carry pepper spray. Next story. Used to work in audit, lots of late nights, 2 a.m. or later. Working overnight was not uncommon. Our office tower was the first true skyscraper built in that city, and was the tallest building around for many years. Naturally, it became a popular spot for self-unalivings for many years. It was haunted AF. During the day, when office workers were everywhere, it was pretty much normal. Late at night, after 11 or so, the building would feel very different. The way that office worked is that lowly audit drones like us didn't have assigned desks, but had 3 rows of long tables for, quote, floating stations. We faced each other with a divider lengthwise across the middle of the tables, so 6 rows of seating. Teams often worked late, and even after midnight, it was common for 1 or 2 teams to be in the office. For some strange reason, even if we started the evening spread out across all the rows, we would end up clustered together on the last 2 rows by the end. The seniors experienced plenty of stuff, and some became pretty numb to it. Seniors would insist we all leave together, accompany each other to the toilets, even the guys, and that no one was to work late alone. One time, it was only my team of 4 working late, past 1 a.m. at that point. We're busy typing away at our laptops, flipping through papers, occasionally leaning back in our chairs to ask a question. We started hearing typing coming from a different corner of the office. It started when we started and stopped when we stopped. Spooked, the senior said to ignore it and quickly finish up. We hurriedly pick up the pace and do our best to ignore the phantom typing. After that, we start to hear rustling paper and small thumps getting louder, like files and documents being dropped on a table. We're getting freaked now. The office seems dark, even though it's brightly lit, and there's this terrible feeling in the air. Without saying a word, we start packing our stuff because we're not paid enough for this. Suddenly, the lights above the rows in front of us flicker, and we all gasp in fear. We're staring wide-eyed at the front rows when one of the office chairs turns and rolls from pretty much the left side to the right side of the office. We bolt out of the office. Forget the laptops and papers. We just grabbed our phones, keys, and etc., and we ran out of there. We didn't even turn off the lights. And then we were back in the office the next morning like nothing happened. I made it a point to leave by midnight after that. I'd rather work on stuff on my bed than stay in the office. Next story. Most disquieting was during the Rodney King riots. There was looting relatively near our grocery store. They closed the store, but the night crew chief walked around the store, handing us baseball bats, and said if the store was breached, we should feel free to defend ourselves. Nothing happened, of course, but was a surreal moment. Next story. I was 3 months into being a driver graveyard shift for a well-known company. Anyway, never got an uneasy feeling at this job site/warehouse ever, but this one night about 2 a.m. felt off. I could shake it. It was like I was being watched, but I was the only one at the warehouse, and we do have security that would watch us on CCTV. The security isn't on site. Literally a warehouse that we keep products in and ship back out. Anyways, back to me feeling weird about 2 a.m. as I was alone picking up more items to run back out to stores. I kept shaking this feeling off. I'd pause, look around the parking lot, outside, and the other surrounding warehouses. There was not a single sound, just crickets and wind. I felt off. I decided to roll down the warehouse doors and secure my truck and step inside to take a leak. I was in the bathroom inside and actually ended up having to poop when my phone alerts me. It's security. I ignore the first 3 calls. 4th call, I pick up. Mr. Steam Shovel, we've detected movement at the warehouse inside. Are you secure? Where is your current position? I tell them I'm not in the warehouse and doors are all secure. They make note the alarm system is active and doors outside the warehouse are closed, etc. I'm wrapping up pooping and I get the goosebumps. They said they would check the cameras and call me back to stay put. I finish up and look out through the doors to the warehouse. It's empty besides product. Doors are definitely secured, nothing's unlocked. You couldn't get in, trust me. They call back. Mr. Steam Shovel, we've detected movement again. The sensors are saying there's movement in the warehouse. Are you currently inside the warehouse? I'm literally looking outside the warehouse at this point and nothing is there. I report back, nothing is there. Again, I have the chills. Anyways, throat is lumpy, talking on the phone with security, and I decided to leave the warehouse and do my run. Quickly, I run to my truck and take off. I'm gone for about 2 hours and they call me once again, saying movement detected and they don't seem to see anything on the million-plus cameras. I arrive back with some cardboard boxes we have to break down into different bins. I'm by myself this time in the actual warehouse and I get this feeling I'm being watched. Can't describe it, but it's like someone was around the corner just staring at me. I couldn't shake it. I finished up my work. I get a text message before my shift that day from my boss saying we need to talk before my shift. Long story short, he tells me someone died in the warehouse 10 or so years ago and it's haunted. We walked out to the warehouse, and right where I felt uneasy at the bins, he stopped without me saying anything and said, "This is where I always feel someone is watching me." I never had another experience besides that night. Next story. I used to work at a nightclub, and every night after my shift, I had to take a bus and walk for 10 minutes back home. One night, in the middle of the walk, it's just me on the street, no cars, and everything dead silent. I see far away this guy that looked in distress. I take off my headphones and hear him talking to himself, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. He sees me, stops, and just stares at me for a few seconds. I get a horrifying feeling that something will happen, feel the adrenaline rush through my body, but I keep walking normally. Then he starts running toward me, screaming, "Where's my brother?" repeatedly. I just turn back and I start running the other way. Fortunately, I was faster and managed to get away, but I can still hear him screaming around the blocks looking for me. That was a terrifying experience, and I remember feeling so relieved as I walked into my building and locked my door. But after that, every night I started walking with just one headphone on and tried to stay aware of my surroundings the whole time. Maybe it was just a crackhead and he wouldn't harm me, but I didn't want to take the chance. Next story. RN here. I used to work nights, and one night I was sent home early because we were overstaffed. So it was about 1 a.m. I'm driving home on empty streets and stop at a red light. I sense movement and I see an animal walking towards my car. It's a very tall animal. Looks like a coyote, but it was as tall as my car. It's staring me down, and then as I lock eyes with it, it starts running towards my car. So I step on the gas, run the red light, and booked it home. Never have I been so freaked out by something like that. My husband thinks maybe I was partly falling asleep or something, but I remember it so clearly. Next story. I guess this is the opposite of creepy, but this is what comes to mind. I used to work at a bar/restaurant that closed late. We often wouldn't get out of there till 4:30 or 5 a.m. after cleaning up. It was in this old brick building that had some kind of history, although nothing crazy enough that anyone ever talked about it much. One night, these ghost hunters, who had some sort of podcast or YouTube channel or Facebook group or something, had asked if they could come in overnight and look for paranormal activity and film it. They came in at like midnight on a slow night and started getting set up. The idea was they would spend all night in this possibly haunted building looking for ghosts with their equipment. The only thing, the few of us working there had spent countless nights in there and hadn't seen anything, obviously. So it was just incredibly bizarre and awkward watching these people set up cameras all over while I finished wiping down the tables. Next story. Hotel night auditor here. I work at a fairly nice middle-class hotel in a decent area, but because I'm usually completely alone at night, aside from my senior citizen security card, I watch my cameras all night. My monitor is right on my desk next to my computer screen. They're not the greatest quality, but they're better than nothing. One night I see a man walking towards the front door from the side. Something about him made me pay extra attention, but I'm not sure what yet. He quickly walks in and goes straight up the stairs, which are located just inside the front door, which means he didn't have to walk past my desk. I watched him go up the first few stairs thinking I'd lost him and wouldn't figure out what was off about him because, unfortunately, I only have cameras on the first floor. Thankfully, our second floor opens up to a balcony that overlooks the lobby, and I heard the stairwell door open and close on the second floor. I walked out to the lobby to see if I could see him on the second floor, and almost immediately heard him banging on a door down the hall and hollering for someone. I called out to him, "Excuse me, hello, sir, excuse me." After a moment, the banging stops, and he walks over to the balcony. For the first time, I see him fully, and he was covered in blood. Head, neck, face, pants, shoes, and most notably, the white button-up shirt he was wearing was a patchwork of bloodstains and splatter. Lots and lots of blood. Turned out, he was seriously plastered and had just been in a bar fight. He ended up crying on the bench outside with my security guard while waiting for cops and EMT to show up. I felt so bad for the guy, but let me tell y'all that when I first saw him all covered in blood, I thought I was about to be the next one on a hit list or something. Next story. Worked for a local security company that was just starting up and specialized in monitoring heavy lev equipment out in the orchards. I had no radio, no gun, no mace, no flashlight, and no phone service. I was strictly there to monitor and take notes, but if anything did happen, the nearest help was 30 to 45 minutes away in town. Fast forward to a few weeks of night shifts along the levee, with it being surrounded by orchards, and I was pretty comfortable at my new location, with its one road in and one road out as the only entrance for a few miles. It was about 02:30 in the morning when I hear an alarm clock going off somewhere in the murky darkness. I'm positioned alongside the levee in this position, O plus O, with my car being the O on the right, the levee as the plus, and the alarm sound coming from the O on the left. I turn my car on and drive over the levee where the workers had a portable office container with a few chairs and a table set up where it sounds like the alarm is coming from. As my dim high beam started to sweep across the orchard, I see a dark figure, multiple rows back, seem to fade behind a tree quickly. I stop there and stare into the darkness, barely disrupted by my POS car's headlights. Nothing moves, and I can hear the alarm still going off, so I get out of my car, and using my phone's light, I find the culprit sat upon a white plastic table. A single, small, square battery-powered alarm clock was singing away as my brain screamed at me to return to my car. I quickly pop the batteries out of the alarm and hop back into my car as the silence returned to the orchards. As I was reversing out of the spot, my headlights bathed the trees in light again, and the same similar shape was now 3 or 4 rows closer, and this time it seemed to crouch down behind a tree. I sat there for a moment longer, staring into the void, before my brain screeched, "What if there's more and this is the distraction?" That thought encouraged me to back up onto the high part of the levee, and there I waited for the next 3.5 hours, alone. It felt torturous, like 1,000 eyes were burrowing into every square inch of my car and soul from every angle. The quietness of an orchard is something very unsettling in the wintertime, as there's no insects or wildlife wandering about. All I could hear was silence and my pounding heart for the next 3.5 hours of my shift. I almost wanted some monster to come tearing through the trees, bellowing out, "Ha ha ha! Here I am, here to eat you!" But instead, I saw and heard nothing more. My morning shifter shows up late and starts casually drinking his hot cup of coffee as I give him the rundown while the sun starts to peek into the sky. I still remember the steam trail from his mug and the chirping of early birds as we decided to investigate further into the orchards. We ended up at the spot where I saw the figure, and after some quick scanning, he ended up spotting some really large footprints from boots that seemed to pace back and forth in a line along one row of trees. We then tracked them as they led forward towards the worker's office container and abruptly stopped near a tree while still a few rows back. Nothing more. No follow-up footprints leading forward or backwards. No vehicle tracks leading out of the dirt. No one could have gotten past me without trudging through the orchard. It was as if someone appeared, paced back and forth in a line for a few hours, walked forward, and then just disappeared without another step. We reported it to the boss, and he shrugged it off, saying maybe it was an elaborate prank by the construction workers. But that was one of the last shifts I worked doing security. Next story. I was closing a restaurant with one other employee. We were in different parts of the restaurant, and she had earphones in. Something tapped in the window. I looked up and saw nothing. Keep scrubbing the grill or whatever. Again, loud rapping on the window. This happened a few more times. I eventually went to the window and looked out. I got really close, trying to see around the wall. A guy jumped out from against the wall. He was out of sight. Slapped both hands on the window right in front of my face and went, "Blah, blah, blah." I jumped back and nearly crapped my pants. Then he made that, "oh god, I effed up" face. He was my coworker's friend. He assumed she would be closing that part of the restaurant. They had an ongoing game where they effed with each other at work. He was getting her back for calling in an order for something like 25 pizzas 5 minutes before he had to close where he worked. This is kind of funny, not gonna lie. Sucks that OP had to be collateral damage, but in a way that kind of made it funnier because ultimately it was just a harmless practical prank. Next story. Several decades ago, I did the night shift at a local corner store in one of the less nice areas of town. Highly dodgy would be generous in describing it. Hilariously, it's now gentrified to the max. One night, the glass door slid open and in strode a half-naked, bone-thin dude who was obviously off his tree and high as a kite. I knew that wild look well. I'd seen this guy before on more than one occasion. What made this night unique was the blood-filled syringe he was wielding. Now, after a couple of years of solo night shift in that place, I'd been held up several times. Knife, baseball bat, even a gun, rare in Australia, but that syringe was new and frightening. Other holdups were scary but run-of-the-mill. Hand over the $50, that was all I kept in the till, and they were on their way. This guy, Gavin was his name, didn't know what planet he was from or on while making demands about him giving everything I had. I've never been so scared in my life. Thankfully, he sawed it off with his $50 and a few packs of smokes. Police picked him up 15 minutes after I called them. They knew him well, also. Found out it was his blood and he was HIV positive as well as had Hep C and a few other things. He got a stint in the psych ward. That's my creepiest life experience so far. Next story. Worked overnight at Walgreens for a few years. My manager noticed some banging types of noises coming from the stockroom in the back of the store. I go on lunch at like 3 a.m. I come back and cover the front register while cashier goes on lunch. Before I do, though, I notice like 8 to 10 cop cars on the security camera in the manager's office. I go to cover the front register, and a cop with a police dog, all dusty, comes running up towards the front of the store. Apparently, 2 guys were using like handsaws and crap and were trying to break into the T-Mobile next door and miscalculated. They got a small hole through before they ran due to the cops coming. I think they caught one guy and the other guy escaped. My manager had to give testimony at the trial like over a year later. Not exactly creepy, but definitely remarkable. Next story. I was working in a property management company just out of college and had done a showing the day before. I accidentally took the keys home, and I knew there was another showing at 8 a.m. the next day, but I wasn't starting until the afternoon. I didn't realize until around 1 a.m., so I went back to drop them in the chute through the door, as it was only a 10-minute drive. The office was in an office park, and it was pretty much empty, except for a few random chairs. Well, I got out and started walking to the front, and one of the cars, a white van, was started, and they turned their high beams on, which were pointed in my direction. Nearly pissing my pants, I walked the final few steps, dropped the keys, and half ran back to my car. As I was driving away, the van came all the way to the edge of the lot and just stopped there. After my panic calmed down, I realized it was probably a security guard on break just trying to see what I was doing. But when I told my boss the story, he said there's no hired security as he's one of the owners of the office park. My boss spoke to the police and they promised to swing by a few nights that week. Nobody ever saw that van again. I don't know what their intentions were, but I'm glad I didn't find out. Next story. I had to park along a road for my midnight shift. Which side I parked on was based on where there was a free spot. There's a traffic island between the 2 lanes. One night, I parked and started walking towards work when a drunk driver in a pickup truck slammed into the sign on the traffic island. The front of his truck ended up over the crosswalk part of the island. If I'd parked on the other side of the road and crossed the street, I could have been hit. Next story. I worked third shift at a hospital in the supply department with a morgue across the hall. I heard the housekeeping supervisor tell this guy named Gene to clean up the morgue. I could see Gene blanch. I casually walked back into my department, then ran to the back, through the freight elevator, doors on both sides, and down another little hall and into the morgue. I turned off the light and stood against the wall with my hand backed onto the switch. 3 or 4 minutes later, the door creaked open slowly, and a hand reached in to find the switch. I closed my fingers over Gene's, and I heard an "ah!" and his feet pounding away down the hall. I walked out and down the hall, and he was leaned over trying to get his breath back. He swore vengeance, but never did take it. I was the creepy thing that night. Next story. I've been waiting to tell this story. Maybe I already have. Who knows? I do not believe in ghosts and crap. I'm a Scully, okay? When I was 21 or 22, I worked graveyard as a cashier at a Chevron gas station at 82nd and Burnside in Portland, Oregon. I heard lots of people say this was the ghetto. FTR, there's no ghetto in Portland, Oregon. One night in the dead of winter, I was outside smoking a cigarette, tucked off to the side of the building so as not to light the place up. There wasn't much traffic as it was after 3 a.m. Bars there close at 2. Suddenly, from the northeast, a radio cab pulled into the lot. They come in a little hot. You know, some of those taxi drivers were a little daredevil-y, so I was ready to deal with one of those cranky overnight cabbies. The driver was an older white man, portly and bald. He looked effing pissed, but also sort of confused. Could be I was projecting, because I only caught a glimpse of his face as he pulled in, and stopped just long enough for the passenger to get out. He hadn't even shut the door before the cabbie pulled away, lurching forward and speeding west on Burnside Avenue. The guy who got out looked just normal. A little handsome, didn't seem drunk, wearing black slacks and a button-down shirt, plus a leather jacket. Not the cool motorcycle kind, mind you, but the kind Adam Scott probably wears. I'd stubbed out my cigarette and walked toward him, opening the door to the convenience store to usher him in. He looked somewhat sheepish, ruffling the hair at the back of his head as he declined to come inside. He asked if I would call him a cab. What was wrong with the last one? I joked. He laughed. I don't know, dude. Effing guy just yelled at me to get out. Got a better fare, maybe. Weird. So I went inside and grabbed the cordless phone. These weren't the days before cell phones, but it was before smartphones. I dialed the number of the company I personally had memorized, which was Radio Cab. The dispatcher answered as I was walking back across the store. She asked the location, I gave the address, and then she asked the passenger's name. Oh crap, I said. Let me go ask. I was already at the door and stepped out. Hey, I called out, realizing he was no longer standing where I left him. Huh? I said to dispatch. Hold on, I gotta find the guy. The building was small. Behind the C-store was a Safeway with a very large parking lot, wrapped around two sides of the building. The other two sides were bordered by 82nd Avenue and Burnside Street. A Walgreens was across the street. Besides that, used car lots further off. The passenger was nowhere to be seen. That wouldn't have been so unusual had it not been for the layout. There was nowhere this dude could have fully hidden or run off to in the, 15, maybe 20 seconds I was inside the store? Not to mention the snow, and not a whole lot of hiding places. I walked out to the sidewalk. Both ways, I looked in the dumpster, I walked into the Safeway parking lot. Dude was gone. I was sharing all this information with the dispatcher, who was amused and somewhat invested at this point. I told her about his drop-off. I narrated my search. It's so weird, she said. What did the driver look like? I described him as I have to you. I heard her keyboard click-clacking, other dispatch girls in the background. There aren't a lot of drivers out right now because it's so late. I only show one in the area. She trailed off. And? I was effing confused and eager to solve this mystery. The only driver in the area right now is a black lady, she told me. We both expressed confusion and, if I'm being honest, a general feel of unease. She gave me her extension to call her back if I figured anything out, telling me she'd be off around 7 a.m. I never saw the guy again. I didn't call dispatch back. That was it. There's nothing else to the story. I didn't stock the goddamn cooler until my relief came in. F that. I was the only one in the store that night, and I wanted to continue believing that. Next story. I was working in an industrial area with lots of heavy equipment around. About 2 weeks ago, I was walking across a facility, and looked down the yard, and saw the outline of a person standing there, about 50 yards away, staring at me. I stopped to try to identify him, and they slowly walked between some equipment. Since this was on a Sunday night, I knew this person didn't belong here. For half a second, I thought about going over to check it out. Then I realized how stupid that would be, and headed to the safety of the well-lit office. I'll never know who it was, but I won't get murdered either. Narrator's commentary. Yeah, we always say pick and choose your battles, and, if you're solo and you don't know what you're up against, just duck into the office, live to fight another day. Literally. Next story. Only worked nights for about a month, so I'll get back to you on the better ones, but here's what I've got so far. I work in an addiction rehab facility. We had a guy the other night get so angry at the nurse's station because she was taking too long, less than 45 seconds, to get his meds and politely asked him not to scream at 1 a.m. that he eventually had to be escorted out by the only male staff on duty that night and our badass clinical supervisor under threat of calling the police on him. He ended up being discharged and dropped with his belongings at the bottom of our driveway. The facility's on a huge hill and told to figure it out from there. Patients have absolutely threatened staff. Haven't had it happen to me personally yet, but my coworker had a cup of soda thrown at her the other day and was told she'd, quote, look good bleeding in his basement. There's a small forest in back of the facility, and problem patients like to sneak off to run around in there. One night, we were missing 3 to 5 of them and took a golf cart out to search for them. If you've ever been on a golf cart in pitch black woods, I don't recommend it. Almost ran over a skunk on that same golf cart. It blended in too well, and my coworker didn't see it till the last minute, at which point she just screamed and pointed. I almost leapt out. Ghostly voice over our walkie-talkies came on and kept repeating, "Leave," over and over between garbled sounds. Turns out it was a staff member who was too far away to be heard clearly and was trying to tell us a patient wanted to leave. Still spooky though. Disheveled crackheads playing hide and seek behind the building in the bushes at 3 a.m. Enough said. Next story. I used to have to stay until the last movie ended at the movie theater. It was usually just me and maybe a friend who would come to hang out for the night. We heard they recently put an alarm on the hatch going to the roof, but if you open and close it before 15 seconds, the door pagers won't go off. So in classic teenager fashion, we had an urge to get on the roof. We ended up getting on the roof with no issues and were just chilling and looking around. As we're about to head back to the hatch, I get a call. It's the movie theater's number, but my friend and I were the only ones there. I answer. It turns out it's my manager screaming at me, asking if I'm on the roof. I hang up and run down to the lobby. There's my manager and 2 cops waiting there for me. I guess when they set the alarm for the office/safe area, it goes off when you open the roof hatch. It was my birthday that day, and the cops basically wished me a happy birthday and left. I never got fired for it, but had my adrenaline pumping. Next story. I worked in a New Jersey liquor store that was open later than most because we were attached to a bar. At 1:45 a.m., a really creepy guy, like picture a predator in your head, and that's what he looked like, came in to get a little $2.34 bottle of vodka. When he went to pay, he pulled out around $1,000 in cash and smiled at me. "Want some?" he asked, and I said no. He didn't stop smiling at me and said he'd be in the parking lot if I changed my mind. That night, I walked to my car with the problem solver, Louisville Slugger kept under the register, ended up running into him while delivering a pizza later that year. He was shirtless and living at a motel and came out to ask if he could help me find the room I was looking for. I'm glad there's now 3,000 miles between us. Next story. I used to work at this one-off little fast food joint in this small town. Place was kind of a local institution because it had been there for so long and the burgers were actually really good. The owner was kind of a jabroni, pretty cool overall, but a cheap old miser. So even though practically no one came late at night, he paid such low wages that he turned a small profit by staying open 24/7 for the few that did come. Anyway, the point being that one of the crappy things about working there was everyone had to take turns on these boring AF graveyard shifts. So the first time I'm on the overnight, it's just me and this one other guy. Again, place is dead, so we pretty much just spend the whole time shooting the crap. At some point, he asked me if I know how the current owner got the place. I hadn't lived there long enough, so I didn't know. I just assumed he was the original owner since he had had it for like 20 years. So then my coworker gets this kind of devious glint in his eye and tells me the story. Apparently, the current owner bought the business dirt cheap. Big surprise there, because back in the day, there was a murder there. Not just a murder, but a double homicide followed by a self-unaliving. The killer was an employee, a drifter that the original owner had hired as a cook because he felt bad for him. And in fact, it had happened on an overnight shift, the victims being the 2 guys working there. He says that this is fairly well known among the people who had lived in that town for a long time, and that there's a persistent legend connected to the incident. Late at night, the killer's ghost comes back to visit and finish off the job. His visits were always preceded by the lights cutting in and out and the killer scraping his bloody, muted weapon on the door. Ooh, right? Obviously, I knew the guy was just messing with me, but it was just late and quiet enough to make me feel a little eerie. So we go back to BSing about other stuff, whatever, just trying to pass the time and stay awake. Well, I guess I didn't succeed, because all of a sudden I feel myself come out of a doze. You know how if a constant background noise suddenly stops, it can wake you up? Well, I think that's what happened. Suddenly, the buzz from the fluorescent lights is gone, and it's completely dark. I feel a half second of fear until I realize what's going on. I run toward the light switch and call out to my coworker, "Yeah, very funny." Then, with noticeable fear in his voice, I hear him answer from behind me. That wasn't me. He's on the other side of the dining room. No way he could have thrown the switch and made it back over there that fast without me hearing him. The lights turn back on and we just look at each other stunned for a few seconds before the light goes off again. Then it comes back on and starts flickering. I'm seriously weirded out at this point, and I'm telling him to cut it out, even though I know he can't be doing it. I hear my voice cracking as I talk. He's trying to play it cool, but I can tell he's as spooked as I am. Then we hear it, a slow, deliberate, unmistakable sound of metal scraping across glass. The lights are still flickering, and we slowly turn to look toward the front door. There's a shadowy, person-shaped thing. I don't know, and it's clearly moving something across the glass floor. We're frozen for what feels like hours. We both know that we're not hallucinating. And finally, my coworker snaps. He had had enough and was just going to confront this thing, even if it killed him and ate his soul. So he runs at the door like a madman and is screaming at the top of his lungs, "What are you? Get the F out of here!" Honestly, one of the bravest things I've ever seen. He throws the door open, ready to confront the ghost, and you know what he finds? Some weird guy asking for hiring. Who the F does that? In the middle of the night? So even though we're a little miffed, we're both super relieved and have a little laugh at ourselves for letting the late night get to us. But then it hits us like a ton of bricks, and at the exact same time. If the scraping was coming from that guy, who was turning the lights on and off? We're instantly terrified again. We look at each other and then slowly turn towards the light switch. And who was there? Effin' Nosferatu. Next story. Lord, I used to do security at a building that was being made into a small indie movie theater. The bathroom was in the basement and it looked like a scene from the Blair Witch movie. The building had light issues and it would flicker and go real dim for a few seconds, then flick bright. One time, it flickered while I was in the bathroom, and I swear I saw something the same height as me dart left, then right, then vanish before the lights go back to normal. Shh, I stood there, looking around for a minute before I ran back up the stairs. Never effing used the bathroom there again. Went to the hotel across the street. Edit. Also did security for a business building with a couple floors and had to check some of them. First night I worked there, I was patrolling one of the floors with my iPod as my flashlight and walked into a room that looked like a meeting room and saw a human figure in the shadows slouched over in a chair. I backed up out of the room immediately and fumbled my iPod like I was Paul effing Blart. Went to flick on the room light and saw this effer chilling in the dark. I mean, what even is this for? Next story. Midnight stocking shift at a small local grocery store. We have a door in the back that's very loud when it swings shut, and me and my partner for that night heard it. Got out our box cutters, just in case, made peace with whatever gods we believed in, then went into the room. No one. We both checked the cameras, still with our box cutters out, and no one. No one went to it. No one was on the other side. It was still just us two. That was one of the nights we made sure to get our duties done before it was mandatory. Next story. I was closing with a new coworker at a small Mexican restaurant during my last semester of undergraduate school. He was a few years older, handsome, aloof, had a terrible tattoo of a sword on his bicep about 3 inches long. It looked like he did it himself. I had asked about it earlier and he didn't answer me. Towards the end of close, he took 2 beers out of the cooler I had just restocked and asked me to sit. I sat across from him at a booth and drank the beer he offered as he started to tell me about the sword tattoo. It was a machete, not a sword. A few years back, he and his twin brother had been at a house party. He didn't know many of the people there, but the woman who owned the place was putting the full court press on him, throwing herself at him. He wasn't particularly interested, but figured, easy sex, why not? He had been drinking, then exerted himself and fell asleep next to the young woman who owned the place, only to wake up to being hit and someone screaming. Still drunk, he could see a man standing over him. He was screaming, and the woman was screaming. The man was hitting him with something wet. Why was it wet? Quickly, he realized that the wet thing was a machete, and that it was wet because there was blood everywhere. He was being murdered for being in bed with this guy's wife. My coworker rolled out of bed and made it out of the garage door completely naked and covered in defensive wounds. He was able to get the next door neighbor to open her door before the man caught up with him. He was in the hospital for several weeks. As I was listening to this story, I started to analyze my coworker's collarbone and forearms. There were long scars in several places. A few looked like burns, and I guess that's what I figured them for before I knew. It was around 1 o'clock when we got up from the table. Completely shocked and creeped out by what I had just been told, I then needed to walk about 300 yards to my car. He walked me silently, and I was grateful. Next story. Security guard as well. I was working as a midnight shift mobile supervisor for a local security company. Our job was to check on guards stationed at various sites in the city, perform mobile patrols of properties for some clients, and answer alarms to confirm a police response was required. There were 2 of us, one on the east side of the city and myself on the west. I got a call from the other supervisor, and she asked me to do an alarm check in her area, as she was scared to do it. It was a funeral home where they do cremations on site. I'm not superstitious and was often asked to do the alarms at funeral homes or other creepy places for others. I arrived on site and called the alarm company to ask which alarms had specifically gone off. She only said internal motion alarm. I asked which door access was tripped and she said none, just internal motion. Not gonna lie, that triggered the spine-tingling creepy vibe. I entered the building and started to head up the stairs, and that was when I heard a noise downstairs. Flashlight in hand, no guns, this is in Canada, I crept down the stairs and started moving slowly around corners and watching for any movement. Going around the last corner, in a room at the back of my basement, something black jumped out at my face, and I did not scream in a manly fashion. Turned out to be a black cat. It seemed to have gotten through a window that was left open on the first floor. I still get the odd jump scare nightmare about it. Next story. Used to work security in a landfill with my only companion being a dog that lives there. My job was basically to make sure no one sneaks in to take scrap metal. It was an easy, laid-back job, especially since it was in the middle of nowhere. One night I'm doing my rounds when I see the dogs there looking down the road, and I see a guy just walking toward the landfill, and I start walking towards him, and notice he looks pretty beat up, like if he got jumped on or something. He passes by a tall bush that was in the road, and I wait for him to step out, but he never does, so I shine my light towards the bush, but nothing. I wait there for about 2 minutes, and nothing, so I decide to get close, and the dog I mentioned starts following me. We get close, and I pull out my baton just in case, and no one is behind the bush, as if this guy just walked and disappeared. I look down the road and don't see anyone. After a few hours, the next shift punches in, and I tell her that I saw this guy, and she interrupts me and asks if he looked beat up with red ripped shirt and barefoot. After I confirmed that she described him exactly, even his hair, she told me that the man I saw died a couple years ago walking in that same road and was hit and dragged by a car that was rushing out of the landfill and left his body behind that bush. I didn't believe her since she was a prankster, but it made me think I still don't have an explanation on who that guy was or where he went to. Next story. I worked in an airport as ground ops, and we'd always have shifts drag to 3:30 a.m. to wait for arriving planes. Whatever, used to it. But when I first joined, one time I ended up at the end of the airport. This end used to be part of a forest, and was sitting there quietly. Heard the door slam shut behind me, but there was no one. Felt cold all of a sudden and decided to let it be, without informing my officer. A few days later, a friend, A, saw another friend, B, walking past him. A said hello and B just nodded, walking away. A then realized that B isn't on shift at the moment. He called another friend, who was B's housemate, and was informed that B was at home sleeping. That was when I realized this part of the airport had its own stories. After a few months of working there, someone told me he was video calling his 4-year-old son at where I sat at 11 p.m., alone, and his screen froze. He went back home only to have his wife tell him that when it froze, they both saw a woman standing behind him, and his son asked who that was. Fast forward another few weeks, and my friend was opening an arrival at 4 a.m. when she turned and saw some old man smiling creepily at her at the boarding gate behind where she was. There was no departing flights at that time, and security does not allow passengers to be at the gate between 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. I talked about all these to my friend, who was a ramp agent, and he pointed across the runway. We could see it well, and that's when I saw a bunch of wooden crosses that are apparently graveyards there. Next story. I used to work at Whole Foods in the bakery. A couple of times while there, I'd be asked to work overnights or come in at 3 a.m., when we turned on the ovens to start baking for the store to open at 6. 2 times while the store was closed, I realized there was a homeless guy pleasuring himself outside the store. Like, I'm standing in the part of the bakery that's on the main floor with my clipboard, making sure we have the right breads going into the oven. I turn my head and there's a guy whacking it and staring right at me with his spare hand on the glass. Each time I had our department's walkie-talkie, so I could talk to every department and manager in the store, and, this is OP from bakery. Morning, OP, what's up? There's a man outside the dining room. Dining room isn't open, is it? No, but he's pleasuring himself. What? Yeah, he's looking right at me, and Jesus, he's licking his lips. Hold on, OP. I'm gonna get the Oh, you were serious. Why would I lie? Get back behind your counter, hon. I'm calling the cops. Next story. I work as an evidence technician, think CSI, for a very busy police department in California. We have a very high homicide rate, and there's always dead people's things on our office, as well as adjoining office, which is the property room. While I cannot think of one particular instance, I hear footsteps, coughing, paper shuffling, door handles, the works all night long. I am/should be the only one on my floor from 3 a.m. to about 5 a.m. on weekdays, 3 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. on weekends. I used to jump and my heart would race every time I heard a noise. Now I'm unfazed. Next story. Posted this before, but I'll post it again. Working night shift in a hospital. The staff toilets were off the ward on a corridor. As you went in, there were 2 sinks in front of you, paper towels to the left, 2 cubicles to the right, and a storeroom between the sinks and cubicles, set back, and no door. The light in the storeroom never worked. Both cubicle doors open. I went into the one closest the door. As soon as I started doing what I needed to do, crying started from the cubicle next to me. Quiet sobbing, not wailing. When I, very rapidly, left the cubicle I was in, the door to the other one was still open and empty. Same ward, but a few months before was the first night I had done on there. It was an old Nightingale ward, so we put the chairs at one end so we could see everyone. The other nurse was reading some notes and said, "Footsteps are here again." We both heard footsteps coming from the top of the ward to where we were, then back up to top. She didn't even look up, just said, "You get used to it." Next story. Hey all, a CNA who specializes in dementia here. I work in my town's nursing home, part of the Trinity Health if anyone is curious. When I first got hired by my nursing home, the aides and nurses on my dementia unit told me creepy stories about strange things that happen. Doors slamming and lights turning on and off. I didn't exactly believe them, and I just thought they were entertaining stories until one night. It was my usual 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, and it was just me and another nurse. I was busy chatting on the patients as I was taking care of, and I decided to take a break from staring at the monitor to stare at my phone. At this point, it's like 2 a.m., and my nurse went on break out her car to take a nap. I was left to ensure the patients were okay. Now, understand, none of my patients walk and are all wheelchair bound, so if they need to get out of bed, I would help them, and at 2 a.m., no one's really awake. I go out to the massive dining room to get at ginger ale, and as I was walking back to the nurse's station, I heard something fall, and of course I said, "Aw, F, now I gotta go pick that up." And as I turn around, I see something run towards the oven out of view. Our dining room is an upside-down L shape. Of course, like any sane man, would I go, "Nurse's name, is that you? Are you throwing crap?" No response. If you and I are playing a game, you really need to work on your aim. And no crap, the dining room's radio kicks on and starts playing Frank Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon." I turned off the radio and called my supervisor to see if she was effing with me. She was busy up on the other unit, so I was the only staff on the unit at the time. A quick head count revealed everyone was in their beds. I don't go into that dining room in the dark now, and I most certainly leave most of the lights on. Next story. I was a night shift convenience store worker back in the day. It was my first week on the job. I noticed out the back window 2 guys were sitting in a beat-up car parked in the corner. I noticed they were not only wearing ski masks in the summertime, but it looked like one of them was holding a 9mm and loading it. I wasn't sure what to do, but I decided to walk out the back door. As I walked out, I stood about 25 feet away from them. One of them saw me. I quickly pulled my old-school flip phone out of my pocket and pretended like I was talking to the police. The 2 individuals in ski masks in the car looked at me for a good 20 seconds, then they drove off. That night, another convenience store 5 miles away was robbed. The clerk died that night. Next story. For a few years, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour CVS pharmacy. During Halloween one year, I was the main cashier. Some dude walks in dressed as the Grim Reaper. His costume was of very high quality. Black robe made of shimmering velvet, black mask made of a silky material that gave it a flowing appearance, and his scythe blade was probably made out of folded tinfoil. A senior citizen came out from one of the front aisles and saw death staring at him. The old man let out a very frightening gasp, clutched his chest, and started trembling wildly, fell back and passed out. Someone screamed, and a bunch of the other people rushed to the front, and all the religious people scattered like rats. It was probably creepy AF for him, but I had to excuse myself to go to the office and call an ambulance because I could not contain my laughter, even though the old man might have been dead and I could not ask death to leave. Next story. I guess I might count as I worked overnight at Walgreens for a while. Worked there for years, though. Our store was said to be haunted, and it got creepy sometimes. One time, I was talking to my manager. We always had one cashier and one manager and one pharmacist on shift at night, and I was on the aisle and she was on the other side, and we were having a conversation. All of a sudden, I hear her over the intercom. from our stockroom, which is probably at least 100 feet away, through two keypad doors. No one was in the store but me, her, and the pharmacist. She had been back there cashing out damaged items for the last 20 minutes. It wasn't the pharmacist, as they don't come out of the back, but even if they did, the pharmacist on duty was a man with an Indian accent, and my manager is a 25-ish old woman. Stuff falling off the shelves, which only ever happens at night, and seeing shadows were the other stuff. I also wasn't the only one that experienced that conversation thing. Next story. I was painting an elevator shaft in a historic building downtown, but due to the fact that the other workers were there during the day to work on the mechanics, I worked alone at night. The entire 4-story building is being painted, so the floors are covered in crinkly drape cloth. I'm on the third one night, in shaft painting, in perfect silence, when I hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps crinkling across the first-story floor. No one has access to the building but me, and I did not hear the door code buzz to open, even if they did. I hold my breath and get out of sight. The activity continues, and my mouth is dry as I call my roommate. I realize that for the past month, I've been showing up to the same location alone, at the same time, and am a petite woman in a well-lit empty home full of windows facing a darker corner of downtown. This is the serial killer checklist, and those footsteps have reached the uncovered stairs and stopped. I whisper the code to roommate and grab a piece of plywood the carpenters left behind and cram myself into a corner and wait. The next 2 minutes are completely quiet until I hear the buzzing of the door and my roommate loudly announcing his entrance. I run out of my hiding spot and explain everything as I, with renewed confidence, search the first floor with my 2x4. All I had time to tell him was, "Come here now," plus address. It slowly connects for him, and he wisely suggests we don't go looking for whoever might be there and just leave. The next day I show up during the day, because a paycheck is a paycheck, and mention that I'm more comfortable with this arrangement to the confused mechanic. Then she asks if anything weird happened on the third floor. He laughed when I didn't answer and says that the guys sometimes feel someone tapping on their shoulder, but there's no one there. I've never finished a job so quickly. F that place. Next story. I used to work a duty-free on a bridge crossing. I was off one night, but while I was gone, a girl around 19 and a guy around 30 walk in, and she's visibly upset and crying. They wander around the store, and she goes into the bathroom, and he tries to follow her in. My coworker goes into the bathroom to stop him, and they can hear her saying things like, "I'm just 19, what about my parents?" The guy leaves the bathroom, and my coworker tries to talk to her, but she won't say anything. After 20 more minutes of them talking in the vestibule, they head back to their car, but he gets in the passenger seat, and she gets in the back. They drive towards the bridge. Note, there's no way to turn around when you get to the duty-free parking lot, so they only had one way to go, which was to the bridge. My manager calls over to the other side of the border to let them know what happened. 20 minutes later, they call back and say there was only one person in the car. Our theory is that night, after they drove past the building, they got out of the car and walked back into the country. Sex trafficking is no joke. Next story. I drive semi-trucks at night with multiple trailers. The style I tend to pull is Rocky's one long 50-foot trailer and a 28-foot pup trailer hooked behind it. After you get out of the cities on some highways, it's just dark. Only thing lighting the roads is the moon and stars. Color in the sky that would make you think you're seeing UFOs flying around. Just beautiful nights. I'm on one of these roads with fog settling in and things are getting darker. This is a 2-lane highway. For no reason, I move into the left lane. The moment I start to question why I even did that, this car with no lights appears along the white line of the breakdown lane. Just parked there, no lights on, and a few feet in front of the car is a woman in a dress gently blowing in the wind, standing on the line looking like she was ready to step in front of a truck. Been a few years now, and of all the things I've encountered, that image haunts me.